Now we know this is the chilliest sounds of, I don't know, space? Who knows? Welcome everybody to another episode of me, your friend Carlz, when I try to make sense, condense, express whatever I said during my Spanish commentary into a mildly coherent English commentary. Um, Today's episode has so many components. You won't believe it. No, I'm joking. I'm thinking about, that saying that goes, hindsight is a B word, and how looking back to the past with the knowledge of the present is a practice that can get a little bit mean. And I don't know, for some reason, always looking back, at least in theory, should reveal to you things that you think you did wrong, things that you did good. Hopefully, to learn about that for the future, the present and the future. That's kind of like the main thing. Everybody, I think, agrees that is the main core component or the main core teaching from thinking about the past, no matter how far. Hindsight. And when you apply that to something that has so many years going, like the case of what I'm talking today, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have a lot to reflect on. You have a lot of hindsight in it. By now, I guess I've mentioned it before during my English commentaries that I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a project, it failed. To this day, that's one of my biggest kind of like conclusions about it. Like the big takeaway is that it failed as what it promised to be, this cohesive, coherent, ever expanding universe of heroes in live action version. The main reason for its failing or for its failure was, of course, the mumbo jumbo bureaucracy of real life. It's way harder to get directors, actors, and everything coordinated in a way that you can get like a long running project. By now, 20 years after the project, we've seen heroes, actors, directors, everything coming and going. Even like the biggest ones. Whenever I sit down and I think about a Marvel universe without Iron Man or Captain America, I'm like, no way. Like, how can that be possible? Yet, that is the case. Even though they go like, oh, Captain America is gonna be in Doomsday and whatnot. But we know that Doomsday is gonna be this multiverse bullshit they are exploiting. It's not bullshit because it's a comic book thing. It's been there forever. And it's gonna be used even more so. But in the case of live action and in the case of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we know why they are doing it. Because with the multiverse, you can get away with so many things in live action. This is, to me, without a doubt, a logistics decision. Like, hands down. They were sitting down on a office room or like office conference room, and they went like, yeah, like we can't keep it going with like the same actors. They getting old, they don't want to be here. I don't know, we can like sign all of these directors for multiple projects, we can afford it, blah 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 blah. And of course somebody said like, what about this thing about the multiverse that both Marvel and DC have done by now? In that case, hell, it's so easy. If you see it happening, we see it happening in front of our eyes. The Spider-Man thing, for example, we know it was mostly fan service. What is that movie? No Way Home, whatever. Like all of the Spider-Man movies have 90s sitcoms names. But we know that was kind of like hype and people were happy about it, but if you think about it, they were just softening us up. They were softening us for what's coming, which is a world of multiverse. Like, okay, this actor is in, this actor is out, because they know they need a Captain America, they know they need an Iron Man. They just know it. And I think Doomsday is gonna be that case. It's gonna be a big softening up for what's coming next. It's gonna be their main sort of, I don't know, like way to do this. That's the way the fabric is gonna be. But anyways, as I said, this episode is about hindsight, and in hindsight, I've been looking back at the MCU, looking back at how I felt back when it was like not what it is now, mostly during the Infinity Saga, the first big story arc of the whole thing. And I've been reminiscing, that's a hard word, reminiscing about the Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn trilogy of movies, and how what they really meant, what they really represented. If we look back at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, there's no doubt in nobody's mind that that movie is genius. That is a genius movie. What James Gunn did there is nothing short of a miracle in my eyes. We are at a stage of the Marvel Cinematic Universe where, like, okay, we have some power, right? We have some energy. We have some what is that, like that when you push something, momentum. We have some momentum going. And then you get James Gunn. They give him the chance to craft not only a story, but to be behind a franchise inside the franchise. This is something that, again, this is all in under hindsight's kind of like light, under hindsight revelation. Something that they have never done again. They have never done it again. Like Ryan Coogler tried to do something with Black Panther. The Russos kind of like did something with Captain America. But Ryan Coogler did only 2 movies. They were like hardly interrupted by the passing of Chadwick Boseman, of course, tragic shit. And the Russos were always too keen into making stuff for the big stories. So even though all the Captain Americas are like Civil War and whatever, they have their appeal, and many of them are really good movies. They were all part of the big picture. That was their main objective. Only James Gunn and his trilogy of movies, one of them being after the Infinity Saga ended, after Avengers Endgame, that is the only trilogy of movies you can see in the MCU where you can see they went like, okay, these are your toys, do whatever you want with them. And James Gunn not only did whatever they want with the toys, but he chose the weirdest fucking toys ever. For those of us that read comics, we can see the before and after the effects of the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. How it changed that team, how it changed those characters. Like who the fuck knew like Drax the Destroyer? Like Mantis was like somehow known, but she's totally different in the movies. Gamora, all of these characters, we take them as a fact now. We like, okay, like these are big characters, but they weren't. That's the thing, they weren't. The fact that they allowed James Gunn to do that is not only brilliant from Gunn's part, but also brilliant from Feige's part, like the head honcho of the MCU. And what he achieved was not only success for the movies, but he successfully showed something that, again, in hindsight, I think should have been the core spirit or functioning kind of like rule, like the governing rule of the MCU. Here's the thing, like normally we comic readers can get annoying and shit, especially with adaptations. And not only comic readers, but like anyone who loves the source material that's being adapted. The point is that in this case, it doesn't have to do much with the content itself, like oh, I wanted my Guardians of the Galaxy comic book to be such and such. No, in this case, to me, what it represents is the fact that an experiment like this could have worked in a comic book manner. What do I mean by this? Like, I've never been inside an editor's room in an editorial like Marvel or DC, but it's clear how it works. You have the big head editors. They, of course, discuss a big event or like a big overarching storyline that they want. In this case, we have been the Infinity Saga. Like, we know this is our objective, this is our goal, right? Avengers Endgame, Thanos, and the Infinity Stones. We know that. Okay, let's create creative teams, give them characters, and make them tell stories that not only use the characters' traits or the characters' stories, their own stories, but make them part of the big story arc. For example, right now in the comic books, if you listen to my comic book show, quote-unquote show, you have 2 Wolverine books right now. You have a Wolverine solo book that is dealing with Wolverine on his own, and it's attached to the Shadows of Tomorrow, the next big story arc for the X-Men, and you have Wolverine that is attached to Armageddon, which is the next big event for the whole Marvel universe, which has Captain America attached to it and whatever. The thing with creative teams is that it can really go bad. It really can really go bad, but it can do good. And I don't think Hollywood and like that level never took a chance on that formula. In a way, and this is a revelation that I had after my Spanish episode, in a way that shows how fucked up this thing is. Because let's say you sign a creative team, a team of writer, director, let's say, and you give them the chance to create a small story arc inside of their big story arc, in this case Guardians of the Galaxy. If the first movie doesn't do well, these executives, they have no patience and they just eliminate this shit. It's not like it doesn't happen in comic books, of course. I've been talking recently about the possible cancellation of Black Cat and what they call the 10-issue curse in Marvel, in comic books. Like, they give you 10 issues to succeed. If not, they cancel you. And in indie comics, it's even worse sometimes. They cancel you after the second or third like issue of your book. They just cancel you. Now, you didn't sell enough. And we see that even now in video games. They give you 3 weeks to get certain amount of people and money, and if not, you're fucked. So again, hindsight reveals us that not only James Gunn was lucky to have success with a bunch of like CD tier list heroes, but he nailed it in how to create a story that is relevant for the characters as well as the main overarching like event, in this case the Infinity Stones. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, 2 and 3 are just movies about family. That's it. That's all they are. They are only movies about families. Since the first scene in Volume 1, when Peter Quill's mom dies, to the last scene. Well, I'm not gonna count the scene where he's having breakfast with his grandpa. To the last scene when they do like the torch bearing ceremony to the new team of Guardians of the Galaxy. That whole thing, it's all about family, found family, created bonds, emotion. At no point Guardians of the Galaxy is taken over by the big main story. At no point. For some weird reason, James Gunn was part of that. Even in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Volume 3 even, like Volume 3 happens after Endgame, and you can see it has zero to do with the whole multiverse saga, which is the next saga after the Infinity Saga. Even more so, if you go and watch the movies of this multiverse saga, none of them except maybe Fantastic Four First Steps has anything to do with that big story arc. You've never seen something more diluted all over the place than the current state of the Infinity Saga. But if you watch Guardians Volume 1, the balance is perfect between introducing new characters, developing them inside their own world, telling the story about family, and having them to do with the main big story arc, which was the Infinity Stones. Everything is there, and it works perfectly. You can look back and think about what made them give James Gunn the capacity to do so. By now, you can probably say that he got the chance to finish his story after the success of Volume 1. That is more than clear. If Volume 1 had been a failure, they would have never given him a chance to do Volume 2 and Volume 3. Back then, I was even not overly critical, but when the first time I saw Guardians Volume 2, I was like, this is a bit formulaic. It kind of like shocked me. That it was formulaic. You know, like, oh, again, the plot about family, it doesn't really have much to do with the big story arc, like the tone, which, by the way, after Volume 1 was the tone for the MCU. James Gunn not only did all the things that I mentioned before, but he also set up how every movie after Guardians Volume 1 was going to be made. And I was talking about Volume 2. When I saw that movie, I was like, yeah, this is a little bit out there. Like, it doesn't really have nothing to do with it. And I myself, back then, I was being lured by that idea of that kind of like point of obsession of having this big interconnected world, like everything needed to be a part of it. And I think it still does, it still counts, but the balance is what makes this thing work, you know. Whereas for the Infinity Saga, for the Multiverse Saga, you have completely lose, like, whatever movies, like every movie and series is doing whatever they want to do. Back then, you still had that, as I said, kind of like obsession with, like, okay, everything needs to be interconnected, everything needs to follow the same objective, same north. But now that when you look back, you begin to appreciate the miracle that was the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. And when you start to compare it with other heroes and other movies that had several sequels during that first half of or that first saga of the MCU, as I said, it's nothing short of a miracle. I might be exaggerating, but well, it's my show. I can exaggerate if I want. But if you compare it to let's say, Thor, a hero that fell victim of this thing that I'm saying, like the to be part of this big overarching, is that a word? Yeah. Man, I should learn phonetic alphabet. This is Shua over Akin. What is this shit? Okay, well, whatever. Thor, for example, Thor Ragnarok, The Dark World, was completely a victim of that. Was a complete victim of that. And even though I don't hate that movie, of course it's not the best one, because it was doomed to have this seriousness and this bleakness that it didn't need to have. And then they go from black to white, and then you get Ragnarok, Thor Ragnarok, which is a complete comedy. It's like a full-on comedy. You see, but the weakness of movies like that, like those, more than the tone and everything, is that they don't have this interconnected story, this one creator behind it. As I said before, Guardians of the Galaxy is about one thing, it's about family. It's about family and the bonds and emotions you create with your family, whether it's natural, whether it's found, whether it is chosen, It's all about that. But what was Thor about during those 3 movies? Every movie seemed to be a different stuff. Every movie seems to point in different directions. The same happened with Captain America. All Captain America movies, even though they're like some of the greats in the MCU, like Winter Soldier, they were all surprisingly small, and Captain America was just like victim of being Captain America, this big icon and everything. And you see how the cycles for these creations, they keep them loose so they can do away with them or like finish them in a second, in a split second. I'm thinking about how many characters have left recently, and how this mixture of bureaucracy, Hollywood, and plot have made it impossible to follow some storylines. For example, Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch was like a C tier character in most of her appearances throughout the MCU, but it was a character that had some potential to have her own story arc between Age of Ultron, WandaVision, and eventually whatever she did on the last ones. But then what did they do? They just killed her. And we can't take a character's death in the MCU the same way we do in the comic books. It's impossible because the comic books are eternal. They themselves, inside of that context, the characters are eternal and immortal. But it's not the same here. So whenever they do away with a character by killing them in movies, it's just so annoying to me. It's so annoying. And as I said, it's an episode all about hindsight. And the way they deal with this is just so awkward. Like one of the deaths that was even more painful was Black Widow, a character that was part of this shit for decades. For decades, I remember seeing an interview with what was her name, Scarlett Johansson. With Scarlett Johansson kind of like reminiscing her time as Black Widow, and she has this really lovely approach to it. Like she remembers it like with love, like spent so much time in this, I did so much stuff. But if you compare the whole story arc of Black Widow all the way to her end in Black Widow the movie, was it really worth it? Was it really cohesive? Did it had a clear objective? Did it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Black Widow, even in the comic books, is a character that is highly flexible, in a sense that they kill her often, they bring her back. Like it's that sort of character. You can argue the same thing could happen in the movies, but it didn't. We really didn't get a story arc. So this sort of train of thought leads you to conclude that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, 2, and 3 is the only true creative cycle for a character in the MCU. It's the only one. Like, even if you compare it with like a big character like Iron Man, you have Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2, which were clearly made or thought together in a sense. Then you have Iron Man 3, which was clearly also an end to kind of like the way I see Iron Man 3 is like this point of no return, like the Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Like they were like, okay, we're not gonna do anything more with this character on his own. So they did with they deleted in a way the whole armor thing, his whole sickness thing, and you think that after Iron Man 3, Iron Man was in a shit ton of movies. Was the character properly developed from the end of Iron Man 3 till the moment he died in Avengers Endgame? Was it properly developed? I'd argue that he wasn't. He was a crutch for Spider-Man, he was a crutch for the Avengers, he was I don't know, kind of like a funny character, like a tool, like to bring some degree of hype or some degree of interest. The visuals of Iron Man themselves that became an icon of the MCU. But he didn't have a story arc. And you can see how these story arcs do not end in a natural way. And that is when you look at Guardians of the Galaxy. That's when you look at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and you feel how natural it ended. I think out of all the ins and outs of characters in the MCU, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is 3, sorry, I keep saying 3 instead of 3. That's a classic Latino thing, you know. But anyways, in Volume 3, you can clearly see James Gunn saying goodbye. That is the best thing about that movie. You can clearly see in the movie the emotions of a project, an idea that he got the chance to finish. And that has become a privilege and something that it's a unique happening in the whole MCU story. And the way he chose to finish it is like a work of love, not only for the characters, not only for the story, but for comic books. That's the true thing. Like, because how do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 finishes? With the passing of the torch for a new team of Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn not only did that for the movies, but he imprinted that in the comic books. Now it has come down a little bit. If anyone had listened to my comic book episode, there's a quote-unquote new Guardians book coming out that came out this week. It's called Guardians of Imperial Guardians. But since Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, the whole kind of like roster, the rotating roster of Guardians of the Galaxy and the different stories attached to it has been, or was, like a common happenstance. I'm using that correct, right? Happenstance. Search your network with AI? What? Everything means AI, man. Happenstance means coincidence. It says it's a blend between happens and circumstance. Yeah, whatever. But anyways, the whole passing of the torch, it is kind of like the main mechanism or the main modus operandi that the Guardians took over after James Gunn. It has really gone down lately. We haven't really seen a constant, ongoing Guardians of the Galaxy book for some time. But the way he did it in the movie, like nobody tragically died, nobody tragically, disappeared. It was so natural. He was letting everybody in this crazy superhero movie world how it's done. So at the end of Volume 3, when like Mantis says, I've been told who to be my whole life, and now I want to explore who I want to be. I love you guys. I'm going away to explore my life. That shit feels so natural. The same way like Peter goes, like I need to I've been grieving all this time. You guys are my family. I love you. You've helped me grieve. But there's a part of me that, or a part of this grief that needs to be dealt with and it's back on Earth. So I'm going. You know, Gamora goes back to the Ravagers despite everything that has happened, and she also goes like, "I'm not entirely sure who I was to you guys, but life moves on." And everybody ends up like that, and then you get the mid-credit scene with Rocket and the new team of Guardians, and it feels natural. And I can't say it enough. I don't get tired of saying it. How good and natural it feels, even though it still feels emotional, even though it still feels sad. Like, this is the only trilogy of movies in the MCU that I've cried in all of them. Like, it just is, because you can see the love in these movies, in these projects. You know, in Volume 3, where Mantis says like to Drax, "You were never meant to be the destroyer. You were meant to be the father." Come on, man. Or when Yondu says in volume 2, yeah, in volume 2, where he calls Peter his son, you know, and then Peter is during the funeral. He says like, "Turns out I had a really cool dad." Like, dude, that shit, I might get emotional. I'm gonna avoid it, but that shit is so well written because the story is cohesive, because you feel how this one story is for these characters, like they don't owe anything to anyone, and they are being created and written by one team of one person who has a clear idea of what they want to do with them, you know. So despite the fact of their own qualities as movies, like they are not all good, but like to me, like Volume 1 is like a 5 out of 5 star. Volume 2 is 4 out of 5, and Volume 3 is 4.5 out of 5. Like, I love these movies. And rewatching them 20 years later, or like when Volume 3 is not 20 years, but rewatching them now, I love them even more, because they don't only show me what a good superhero movie could be, but they show me that the experiment works, that formatting these universes as, okay, this guy, well, now James Gunn is one himself, but these Kevin Feige guys, these James Gunn, they are editors, right? They're head editors. All they have to do is have a main big idea and create small creative teams to create. I said create like 20 times, but that's what they need to do. That is the true genius of it. Like, everybody like go like, "Oh, Kevin Feige, blah, you're so good and everything," but like, to me, that is not the case. He seems like a big producer. He's like a Hollywood producer, you know. Okay, I'm gonna make this thing happen. I'm gonna bring big names. I'm gonna bring big actors. But he's not a comic book editor. He's a Hollywood producer. So even though they hit it off, and I know they had success with the Guardians project, they had never done it again. I hope James Gunn brings that sort of things to the DCEU now. But for now, I'm just gonna look back at Guardians of the Galaxy as the trilogy of the MCU that showed that the concept worked. Even though the Marvel Cinematic Universe failed, the concept worked. It could have been way, way better. You know? Now it makes you wonder, how should we have had a story arc like that for Black Widow, for Scarlet Witch, for Iron Man, for all of these characters that have left us. And as I said, this is no small thing for the live action thing. It's not something that you can just revive. And now you have the She-Hulk actor and Mark Ruffalo, both of them kind of like in question because of their politics. You have so much of that BS going on. Then you have like Doomsday that is supposed to be already recorded, but you know that they are like balancing stuff with Doomsday and seeing how everything in between is received. The fact that the whole volume of Marvel stuff that is coming out has shrunk, that is the main reason. The superhero fatigue was real, but the superhero fatigue was real not because there were too many superhero movies, but because they weren't all made with the same care and love that Guardians of the Galaxy was, or were, as a bunch of movies. You know. But anyways, I will leave it at that. Guardians of the Galaxy as a trilogy will remain as this little experiment, this little trilogy, this little 3-movie experiment that showed us for a brief moment what could have been. What we have is not necessarily bad, but it's not this good. Thank you, James Gunn. Thank you. I don't think I've ever cried with another trilogy besides Lord of the Rings, so that's something to say. You know. So we'll see you next week with another commentary. I was meaning to talk about another movie that made me cry. Man, I think as I get older, my black emo heart gets softer. And lately it's been way too easy to cry at media. But I love it. Because media has the heart and the emotions that if you look outside your window, I'm not gonna say you're not gonna find it, but it takes a while. Thank you all for listening. Have an amazing day, week, month, whatever. And see you next time. Bye bye.